Hello, BookTube. Today I am reviewing Marble Season by Gilbert Hernandez. It's a 2013 graphic novel. Focuses on primarily one Mexican-American boy in what is the 1960s. And Hernandez has got a very kind of deceptively simple kind of line drawing style, almost something that you might see in a Saturday morning comic. Everything's told in a very kind of structured six panel grid on each page, so it's which serves well in a book like this where it's kind of telling a kind of a simple narrative, and it's kind of focusing on very much kind of quotidian life of these kids, especially Huey. A lot of the story, it's kind of episodic. It's just there's not real strong narrative structure. It's almost like it's Marble Season. It's almost like it's just kind of days in the lives of these kids and in their lives. You know, him playing marbles, or comic books, or him writing his comic book plays or movies. There's bullies. And there's not really there's not like a story to be told here. It's very much just sort of observing life from the kind of a kid's viewpoint. I think that the fact that there isn't actually a narrative sort of makes it oddly a less kid friendly book than it is more of like, this is obviously an adult looking back on his childhood. This is supposedly a semi-autobiographical book, so whatever that means, he's taking inspiration from his childhood to tell these stories. Gilbert Hernandez is known with his brother they created 11 Rockets, which is much more kind of adult themed, very gigantic series of books, and they both split off into their own storytelling worlds, and Gilbert's is very can be very lurid and hypersexual and violent, and going into some of his later books are very psychologically tormented and kind of kinky and stuff like this. Where this is definitely much more, focusing on child's life, and in that sense it is appropriate for kids. But the fact that it is so, we're kind of just dipping out of kids' lives. You could almost see this as a kind of one of these Saturday morning. If you ran across this in the Saturday morning paper, you're like, oh, there's a little wistful slice of life, but what was the point of it? Now, the power of Hernandez is that, I know from his other works, is that he can play the long game, where he'll just sort of build up details and these characters over a very long space. So in that sense, this almost feels like it's sort of the first chapter, or kind of the opening, clearing the throat of what's going to continue on as a more developed story. I mean, that's my thought in it. I mean, it could be just, I just wanted to kind of get that sense of my childhood at this time, and then drop it from there. As such, I don't know if it's entirely successful as that. Hernandez's storytelling style, he doesn't use voice, the cartoon version of voiceover of perhaps having kind of an authorial voice, saying these, this is what it was like in these days, but I didn't realize this was going on with this kid, or that this is the backdrop of the racism or the politics of the time. This is very much told from a very kind of removed, God's eye point of view, watching these kids doing their stuff, and you don't get you don't get internal dialogue. You have to watch carefully at all the little details he drops to perhaps get an idea of how they're doing, which is a part of how he draws you in as a cartoonist. He's very much, you have to look below the surface. So it's one of these books that you probably have to kind of go back to. I can see going back to multiple times to just try and kind of figure out what's going on, and stuff like that. But as a surface reading to start, you might be kind of tempted to kind of just dismiss it as this slice of life. That said, I would hope that there would be more volumes that you could build upon this with, and that might make it a more satisfying read. A quick note: at the very end of this book, he has an essay by Corey K. Creekmuir, Associate Professor of English and Film Studies at University of Iowa. And it's an essay, what it feels like childhood in Gilbert Hernandez's marble season. So it's a academic essay, or just an essay on the actual book at the back of a newly released book, which really puzzled me. And I read some of it, but I found it kind of rather irked me because it was whether it was Hernandez. I'm going to have to assume it's Hernandez's choice to put something like that in the back of his book, which seems to be rather begging the question or trying to prop up a work. Like, is that showing some sort of lack of confidence in the work, that he would feel it necessary to put some professor's interpretation of his work rather than letting the work stand on its own? So I found that I didn't read it all because it bothered me. It bothered me so much. It's like this thing should either stand on its own or it shouldn't. And yeah, so that was a rather sour note to end on. Actually, okay, there's one hilarious thing I find, because Hernandez, picture of the author right there, he was born in 1957, so he's like 11 years older than I am. But he's got like little footnotes at the end of the book, which are sort of saying, like, what happened on certain different pages. And on page 17, panel 2, carbon paper is coated on one side with pigment that transfers to a piece of paper underneath when pressure is applied, allowing multiple copies of a document to be written at once. So I guess this is one of these footnotes that's for his younger readers who have no idea what carbon paper is. So I just thought that was, as an old geezer who does know what carbon paper was, and actually probably came in just at the tail end of typing class of using carbon paper, I thought that was quite the hilarious footnote of, hey kids, here's what carbon paper is. Hey kids, here's what a VCR was, or hey kids, who was Bozo the Clown? Stuff like that. I just thought that was I thought that was funny, but it does show, like, oh, you're going to need the footnotes later on. As works go by, you're going to need the footnotes to help people understand bits of your work, which I just thought that was funny. So yeah, it was an enjoyable book overall. Didn't need the essay. I look forward to hopefully further volumes in this semi-autobiographical work. I would have to say, in a lot of ways, it feels like, okay, are you sort of starting over with your story cycles in Love and Rockets, which also felt very autobiographical? Is this going to be, he's going to be telling more about his autobiography as he goes along? And I would look forward to that. I would look forward to that more in the same vein, because I am a fan of his earlier work. So yes, that's Marble Season by Gilbert Hernandez. More videos later.